The morning sunlight filtered through the hospital window as Ethan, a single dad and part-time janitor, mopped the hallway outside the children's therapy ward. He always hummed softly while working, a habit his late wife used to love. That's when he saw Lily, the CEO's blind daughter, sitting alone on a bench, her small hands clutching a white cane, her head bowed in silence. Nurses whispered that she hadn't spoken since the accident that took her sight, or her mother. Every day, Ethan watched people talk at her, therapists, doctors, even her father, but she never responded. She seemed lost in a world that no one could reach. One rainy afternoon, while Ethan cleaned near her bench, his little daughter Mia ran up and handed Lily a paper flower. "It's for you," Mia said with a bright smile. Lily didn't react. But Ethan knelt beside her and said softly, "You don't have to see the world to feel it. It's still beautiful, Lily. You just need someone to remind you." For the first time, Lily's head turned slightly toward his voice. Her lips trembled, as if she wanted to say something, but couldn't. Ethan smiled gently. "It's okay. I'll wait." And from that moment, something shifted, not just in Lily, but in everyone who saw that quiet act of understanding. The next few days, Ethan made sure to clean near the same bench every afternoon. He never forced conversation, never asked questions, he just talked. About the smell of rain, the sound of birds, the way sunlight felt on his hands when he opened a window. Lily never replied, but he noticed her head tilt slightly whenever he spoke, like she was listening between the pauses. One day, as he swept the floor, he heard soft footsteps. Lily was there again, holding Mia's paper flower, slightly crumpled but still intact. "You kept it," Ethan said warmly. Lily nodded, almost imperceptibly. It was the first response anyone had seen from her in months. Encouraged, Ethan continued. "You know, Mia says flowers don't need eyes to find the sun. They just feel where the warmth is." For a long moment, silence filled the hallway. Then, barely above a whisper, a fragile voice broke it. "Does the sun still shine, for people who can't see it?" Ethan froze. Lily had spoken. He swallowed hard, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "Always. Especially for them." Tears glistened on Lily's cheeks as she reached out, finding Ethan's hand. "I miss my mom," she whispered. "I know," Ethan said softly. "But she's part of every warm breeze that touches you. You'll never lose her." That afternoon, the nurses stood speechless as they watched Lily laugh, faintly, but freely, while Ethan told her about the funny way Mia thought clouds were made of candy. For the first time in months, the ward felt lighter. Lily wasn't just hearing words, she was feeling hope. When word spread that Lily had spoken, the entire hospital buzzed with excitement. But no one was more stunned than Richard Hale, her father, the powerful CEO who ruled his company with the same control he wished he had over his daughter's pain. He rushed to the ward, expecting to find a doctor or therapist responsible. Instead, he found a janitor sitting cross-legged on the floor, telling stories about raindrops to his daughter, and Lily laughing. "Who are you?" Richard demanded, his voice sharp with disbelief. Ethan stood respectfully. "Ethan Walker, sir. I work maintenance here." "You're telling me my daughter spoke to a janitor?" The words carried more insult than surprise. Lily's smile faded instantly. "Daddy, he's my friend," she whispered, clutching Ethan's sleeve. Richard blinked, stunned. He hadn't heard her voice in months, and now, this man had done what therapists, money, and specialists couldn't. Still, pride clouded his gratitude. "I appreciate what you've done, but my daughter doesn't need charity. I'll make sure you're compensated." Ethan shook his head. "I don't want your money, sir. She just needs someone to listen, not fix her." That night, Richard replayed the scene in his mind. His daughter's tiny voice. Her smile. The warmth in Ethan's words. For the first time, he realized all his wealth couldn't buy what Ethan had freely given, understanding. The next morning, he found Ethan mopping the corridor again. Richard's tone softened. "Would you join us for breakfast? Lily asked for you." Ethan smiled quietly. "Of course." And as they walked toward the cafeteria, something remarkable had begun, not a treatment, but a healing. The following weeks transformed the hospital into something it hadn't been in months, hopeful. Lily began to speak more, sometimes only in whispers, but her words carried light. She laughed when Mia visited, sang softly when Ethan described the sky, and even asked her father to join them one afternoon. Richard sat quietly, unsure how to fit into this simple world his money couldn't control. But Lily's laughter tugged at something he hadn't felt since before the accident: humility. One afternoon, he found Ethan teaching Lily how to fold paper cranes by touch. "She can't see them," Richard said softly, his tone uncertain. Ethan smiled. "Maybe not with her eyes. But she can feel beauty. That's enough." Lily grinned, her small fingers tracing the edges of her paper bird. "Daddy, mine's flying," she said proudly. For the first time, Richard laughed, not the polished, polite laugh of a businessman, but a real one. He looked at Ethan, his voice quieter. "You've given her something I couldn't." Ethan shrugged. "Sometimes love doesn't need fixing, sir. Just someone who listens long enough." Days turned into weeks. Lily began walking confidently with her cane, guided by sound, by warmth, and by trust. Nurses stopped to watch her progress. The blind girl who had once refused to speak now greeted them with a smile. One evening, as the sun set in streaks of orange and gold, Lily whispered to Ethan, "You said the world is still beautiful. You were right." Ethan smiled, his eyes damp. "You made it beautiful again." And standing in that glow, even Richard felt the truth: healing didn't come from doctors or wealth. It came from kindness shared in silence. A month later, Lily was ready to leave the hospital. She stood by the entrance, white cane in one hand, Mia's paper flower tucked safely in her pocket. Ethan was beside her, smiling proudly, though a quiet sadness lingered behind his eyes. He knew this was goodbye. Richard approached, his usual authority softened by gratitude. "Ethan," he said sincerely, "you've done more for my daughter than I can ever repay. If you'd ever like a position at my company, name it." Ethan smiled faintly. "Thank you, sir. But I already have the best job in the world, being a dad." Lily reached out and found Ethan's hand. "You promised to tell me one more thing," she said softly. He knelt beside her, lowering his voice until only she could hear. "What I whispered that day, when no one else did, was this: you're not broken, Lily. You're brave. You don't need eyes to see love." Her lips quivered, tears streaming silently. Then she leaned forward and hugged him tightly. "I'll never forget you, Mr. Ethan." Richard turned away, swallowing emotion he couldn't hide. For once, he understood, real strength wasn't in power or control. It was in compassion. As Ethan and Mia walked toward the bus stop, Lily's voice echoed behind them, bright and steady. "Goodbye, Ethan. The sun's shining today." Ethan stopped, looked back, and smiled. "It always is, Lily. You just have to feel it." And as the doors closed behind them, Richard knelt beside his daughter, holding her small hand. He didn't see a blind child anymore, he saw light. Sometimes, the right words don't come from those with titles or wealth. They come from those who still believe in kindness.